Well, good to see you again.
Well, it's great to see you too, and thank you for having me back. I know we had a lot to talk about last time that we just didn't quite finish. Oop, our internet is funky. Hmm.
And I know. Yeah, it's a bit of a delay.
Yeah, I'm getting a delay too. I don't know. It's like pouring here, so I don't know if that's giving us problems or what the deal is.
That's all good. We'll navigate it. We'll figure it out as always.
Yeah.
So what have you been up to? You had a couple of speaking gigs, a couple of conferences like Brink and Momentum Fest, and
It's been a while. Yes. I presented at Momentum. I can't remember if that was before or after I saw you last. I think it was before. I
yeah,
think I had maybe just presented. Um,
yes,
and then I did Brink about 2 weeks ago. So did you, which
yes.
was really a wonderful platform set up by Jenna Cicino to
Mm,
really focus more on the business side of Pilates for people who don't know or who didn't attend. And there were just a huge amount of workshops across the board on all things business and also I would say self-empowerment and a lot
yes.
of personal stories on how people sort of navigated opening their business and finding their niche in the Pilates world. And so that was really a lot of fun. I got to watch a lot of the workshops and I'm still catching
Mm,
up because everything was recorded so we could live stream it afterwards. Um,
yes. Yeah, I have to watch mine still, and some of the ones that I wanted to see, but I was too nervous about my presentation, so I couldn't really soak them in, so
Same. I was first thing in the morning, so I kind of had to just get it over with, and then I felt like I
yes.
could relax and watch everybody else.
Yeah, jealous. I feel like I missed everything before me. Like so,
I know how that is.
yeah. The and it's interesting too. You did a live on Jessica's for Momentum Fest, and
Yes.
and that was really interesting for me as a male, as a dad. Seeing my wife at the time go through a lot of complications with her pregnancy. When we had our first conversation, we just kind of just scratched the surface with that, and it was fresh, and there's a lot of things happening in our world, kind of on a social level as well. So it was interesting putting the pieces of the puzzle together, hearing you talk about like your pregnancy and challenges in your personal life at the same time. The world was waiting for a response for you on racism in the fitness industry, and you're like, I'm just trying to heal over here.
Yeah.
Like, you know,
Exactly. And I was trying to heal also from something that was may or may not have been influenced by exactly what was going on, this implicit bias that exists in the medical community. So I was kind of like, I'm in this right now. I'm sorry I
right.
can't put myself out there more, but I'm literally in the middle of something that's a repercussion of this bias that we have in our
Mhm.
society.
Yes. And on top of that, it's personal. It's like none of your business. Like, you know what I mean? So
Right.
how do we
Exactly.
like there's like this balance, like, and I was writing some of our thoughts down from our last conversation just around like, heroes, I mean heroes, athletes, and they would say like, I am not a role model. We're thrust into this space where yes, we feel like, yeah, it's important to say things, but then we feel like at the same time there's an obligation to have a response, an obligation to share what's going on in our world, an obligation to have an excuse why we haven't said something.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really interesting point because I think that if you have a more public persona, there seems to be this responsibility to speak out when things happen. However, a lot of times our public persona is not necessarily because we've been involved in social issues that need to be spoken out about. It's often because we've spent a long time dedicating our energy and attention to our craft. And
Yes.
that's why we ended up in the place that we are. And
Hmm.
personally, my craft is is teaching. And so I've spent a lot of time and energy dedicating um, my work towards becoming a better Pilates teacher and other teacher too, but especially Pilates teacher.
Hmm.
And so I felt like, okay, yes, there's of course a lot I have to say about this as a human, but this is not the reason why I have a platform. I have a platform because I wanted to become a better Pilates teacher. Um,
Yes.
and I think with athletes, it's the same thing. If
It's
you've
the
spent
same
your
thing.
entire life focusing on basketball or football or gymnastics or whatever it is, and then suddenly you're thrust into this spotlight, to a certain extent, I think that it's important to speak out if you feel like there are things that need to be addressed because you have the voice. But
Yes.
at the same time, that's not the main focus of your training up to that point. And so
Right.
that's where it gets a little bit tricky, I think.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And and I like that as reflecting on the basketball situation too. Like I loved how one, how players would kneel during the
Mm-hmm.
anthem because that's their stance. And then every now and then there'd be a player who, for their own reasons, elected to stand.
Yeah.
And the dialogue between those who stood and those who kneeled was accepted. And then there was a conversation around that. Like you see how people are, like, I keep quoting Sonia on this. People are being activists in their own way.
Right, right. Exactly. And what I think people are grappling with in the Pilates world right now, with everything that's going on with the bullying and the bias and everything, is that people assume that if you're not speaking out on a social media platform, you're not doing anything.
Right,
And
right.
similarly with the basketball players, it's like if they weren't taking a public stance, it was like they were being complicit. But that's not necessarily true.
Right.
And I think we really have to be respectful of that because everybody has their own way of being activists. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're sitting back and watching the show.
Right, exactly. Can you just bring the audience up to speed on the bullying component that we're talking about? Because people have been throwing that out, like bullying's happening here, bullying's happening here. So just can you just give a like example of where this has been happening and how we're responding to it collectively?
Yeah, well, so Anula recently was the target. Anula and actually quite a few other Pilates teachers.
Yeah,
Um,
Gwen is on here too, actually.
Gwen, and there's more, but quite a
Hmm.
few
Hmm.
Pilates teachers were the targets of some major online bullying by someone who calls, for those of you who don't know this, what's going on, who calls herself the Pilates Nazi. And to be honest, the bullying was, it was like, it was so extreme. It was very public. It was very degrading. Um, it was really just ugly. And
Yes.
I mean, it was racist. It was homophobic. Uh, it was like anti-fat. It was, I mean, it went on and
Like an
on. It was
equal
like,
opportunist bigot.
yeah, it was
Like,
bigoted across the board.
yeah.
And so a lot of people spoke up about it. A lot of people came to Anula and the other teachers' support, some more publicly than others. But I think that this particular instance is just indicative of a sort of more subtle problem that's sort of ongoing across the community, where somebody might post something on one of the public forums and somebody else
Hmm.
will counter back like, I can't believe you're doing this exercise, why are your knees like that, why is this
Yes.
this, I don't like this. And there's not a lot of room for, I would say, like constructive criticism or
Hmm.
sharing
Yes.
um, amongst the board, across the board. And I think that that's a real issue in the Pilates world. And then
Yes.
to sort of translate that back to this whole classical versus contemporary debate, I think that while there's bullying across, maybe classical Pilates teachers don't like what the contemporary teachers are doing and vice versa, there's also bullying within that world. So contemporary teachers are still
Absolutely.
bullying other teachers for so many
Yes.
reasons.
Right.
Um, you know, Diversity is just one of them. And
Hmm.
so I think that it just really put this lens over the Pilates community. It's indicative of what goes on in society for
It's
sure,
absolutely.
but it's very clear now in the
Hmm.
Pilates community that this is a problem. Even though we sort of brush it under the rug, it's a problem.
Yeah, I think that's why I keep bringing it up in all of my dialogues that I have, because simply it's this is just a microcosmic example of what's happening in the larger space, right? Like the
Right.
fitness, like Chrissy and I talked about that yesterday. What happens in the fitness industry is just a mirror of what's happening outside of the fitness industry in corporate America and in our neighborhoods and stuff. So if we can't use how we're handling it within the Pilates community, since this is our dialogue, this is our economy, this is our thing,
Right.
um, it doesn't like I don't know how to put it exactly, but we got to figure it out here, and then we could use the blueprint of how we do it here to take it outside of here.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's like what sort of baffles me is we're teaching. Okay, so we take on the responsibility of being teachers when we enter into
Yes.
this career. And one of the things that's one of the main tenets of Pilates itself is mind and body connection. And
Yes.
so to me, having a strong mind body connection means being willing and able to accept my body for where I am at any given point. So
Yes.
if I have to accept my body for where it is, then ideally I'm also going to be able to see that other people are in different stages of acceptance of their body, and they also need to accept their bodies for where they are. So, as a teacher, my goal is to help and allow and augment that acceptance and that sort of understanding of someone's body so that they can then have a better relationship to their body, a better connection, a better sense of grounding, and use that connection to figure out how to physicalize the work, right?
Yes.
So if that's what I'm working on as a teacher, then shouldn't that acceptance be carried out into the broader scope of how people talk about bodies?
In theory, yes, but I see why the answer is no.
Right.
Um, and that part is forgiveness. It's one thing to accept where you're at. It's another thing to forgive yourself for where you're at.
Yes, for sure. For sure.
Right? So if we're in the process of beating ourselves up and we can't come to that place of acceptance, how are we then supposed to accept someone else when we can't accept ourselves?
Absolutely. But that's the work that we have as teachers. And so, as teachers, if we turn around and start bullying, we're basically going counter to everything we're trying to teach.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's why I always say hurt people hurt people.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
Absolutely.
we could be the best teacher in the world technically, but if we have our hurts, those hurts get projected into the way that we teach. There's triggers, there's things that we do, and it comes out, and we could be mean at that point.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I mean, we've all had teachers who were mean. I think, like, especially because I come originally from the ballet world. I mean,
Ballet.
that kind of
That's like, there we
behavior
go.
is like, that's
Yes.
just how it is. I mean, teachers are really mean. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of it comes from that place of having their own issues that haven't been addressed, usually,
Right.
usually.
Yes. Usually. Yeah. No, I mean, like Joel saying, those are beautiful points, and I'd love to see people get to that place. I think one of the words too is cultivate. That's what we need to do in our spaces is cultivate that safe um, self actualization place, right? Like that's place where we can discover where we're at and how we can get better, so to speak, and how we can take care of ourselves.
Absolutely. And I think cultivating that environment in our studios or now in our virtual spaces is so vital because
Mhm.
it's not just about our own acceptance of ourselves. It's not just about how we teach our teachers. It's also about cultivating a space where everybody feels comfortable walking in the door. Um,
Yes.
be it short, tall, round, skinny, whatever it is.
Mhm.
Everybody has to feel comfortable in that space.
Right.
Um, and that has a lot to do with, I mean, what we put out there, who we bring into this space, how we set the
Yes.
intention for creating energy in the space.
Right.
That has so many aspects to it.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, there's so much in that. And I lost my train of thought because I didn't want to interrupt you there.
It'll come right back.
Yeah, it totally it will. Yeah, but I mean, just I guess that ballet thing resonated with people like Blossom's like truth.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I had some like really tough football coaches coming up too, and there's a sense that like this, all these things kind of build our own resilience as well. Like they make us so they make us stronger at the same time, right? So
For sure.
yeah, too cold.
Yeah. I mean, Blossom and I both come from the dance community, and there's a huge issue in the dance community of teachers who are just, I would say, through today's lens, you would consider them abusive. Um,
Yes.
I definitely had teachers like that, but it's interesting because for me, I think that it made me probably more resilient.
Mhm.
However, for most, or not for most, but for some
For
people,
some
it does
people,
the exact opposite. Yeah, I mean,
yes.
it really just depends on, I think, who you are as a person, what kind of support you have, what you're
Hmm.
able to let roll off you and what you aren't, how much you want to get to that end goal. That's
Yes.
a big one too.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so, for some people, that kind of environment is absolutely toxic. For some people, it's okay.
I said, yeah, exactly, exactly. As we were talking about cultivating our new space, I didn't remember what I was going to say. Um, I've caught myself, we have all these conversations about being empowering in our words and body positive, and I've caught myself dropping the phrase "you look good" and shifting it to "you move so well." Wow, you move so well. Look at that. Like and just placing so much emphasis on what they can do as opposed to
Mm-hmm.
what they look like, for good or for bad. Like even when people are like they're looking better, they're losing weight, that's great, but I'm still celebrating how they're performing as opposed to how they're physically looking on their path to progress.
Yes, I do the same. Well, I I do this. I do my best to do the same. I work a lot with ballet dancers, professional ballet dancers, and in ballet, weight is a very loaded topic. And
Yes.
so, when I first began teaching dancers, I had to be very careful to make sure not to make any reference to any sort of weight, anything. I
Hmm.
never say you look slim, you look heavy, you look whatever, because
Right.
that can send people into a major spiral. And so I've always been very hyper aware of saying, unless somebody says, I'm trying to lose weight, can you tell me when you see that I've reached blah, blah, blah milestone?
When
I
they
don't
invite you
comment
in.
on it. Exactly. If they invite me to make a comment on whatever it is, then like if I know somebody's on a 9 month journey to lose weight and she wants my support in that, then when
Hmm.
I start to notice that something has happened, I will say something if I've been invited into that conversation.
Yes.
However, if I have not been invited into that conversation, or even if I do notice someone has gained weight,
Yes.
lost an ear, lost an arm, it's not my um, it's not my responsibility. It's not my I'm not invited to make a comment unless it directly impacts what we're doing.
Yes.
However, that being said, on the
Yes.
other hand, I have gone to clients who've become too thin, whether
Hmm.
for issues with eating, or I had a client who's dealing with lung cancer. And when they become too thin to the point where I feel like it could be dangerous in our session, and
Yes.
don't forget, I'm working with a lot of classical ballet dancers, so that is a real issue. Um, then I do sometimes say something and I will step in. Like if I see a
Of
teenager who's
course.
suddenly dropped 20 pounds, I'm going to say something to her parents.
Oh yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
It's important, but in general, I really think that talking about like, oh, that's good job, or whatever, is not necessarily helpful
Hmm.
in the Pilates world. And I was actually reading something recently about child development, and I have a 7 month old now, and it was saying that it's really important to name, instead of just congratulating your child on everything, it's really important to name what they're achieving, So
Yes.
instead of saying, wow, good job, because they stood up, you can say, I love the way you got your legs under you and stood yourself up.
Right.
And so that I think harkens back to the Pilates world, because naming what they've done well or what's improved, like, wow, your spinal articulation looks beautiful, is different than just saying, great job,
Good.
you look great,
Okay.
you know?
Yes. 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 Yeah, absolutely. And sorry, and Joel had a question here. Do you think that ballet attitude affects the Pilates world?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I think the issue, and
Yeah.
here's what's so fascinating to me, is that a lot of Pilates teachers were former dancers, whether professional or not. And I think actually sometimes not professional can be more damaging, because there is sometimes
Blossom's like, yes. Three.
yeah, there's sometimes like a bitterness about not achieving a professional career.
Of
And
course.
also sometimes there's not, a lot of dancers who dance through, say, high school haven't really been able to figure out how to embody dance in a healthful way. And so
Hmm.
they will sometimes have the behaviors left over from those abusive teachers, from those eating issues or whatever, that they then bring into their fitness world.
Yes.
Whereas dancers who really had to figure out how to have a long, sustainable, healthy career
Hmm.
generally tend to have a slightly more balanced view of the body.
Right.
But
Would you? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
oh, sorry. No, I mean, I think, but that's definitely true. And then, and I think that's sort of the problem in the Pilates world, is that we have a lot of people who've come from that dance community who have this sort of distorted body image. And then we're
Hmm.
teaching people how to have a better body image. It's a
Right.
little tricky, right?
That's hurt people hurting people.
Right,
Right.
right.
And also with that too, there's a sense of your own identity. And I know that for myself, coming from sports, you reach this point where you have to say to yourself, I'm not a football player. I am a human being who plays football. I'm not a
Right.
ballet dancer. I am a woman who dances ballet. There's something about separating what you do and who you are that you need to bring to the table as well, to separate that so that you can grow, or else you're stuck in this pattern of your identity being lost in what you do.
I think that that's true, but I would say for almost every dancer I know, your identity is a dancer first.
Right. And is that good?
I don't know. I mean, I mean, I retired now when I was 20, I think 27, something like that. Even as someone who retired when I was 27, I would still probably say I'm a dancer first.
Yeah.
Um, and that's 12 years ago. I mean, that's a long time.
Hmm.
So I think that, at least for dance, I think because people fall into it so early, um, you grow up with that being your identity. Yeah, Boston says
Oh,
you
for
can't help it.
sure. No, no, no.
It's
I
so much a
respect the
huge
fact
part.
that.
But then and I don't think it's necessarily important to separate that from your identity, but it is important to reframe how that identity shapes your practice as a teacher. Um,
Okay. Yeah,
so like I
that's true.
retired because I had a really bad injury. I ended up having to have 4 ankle surgeries. 3 of them were full reconstructions.
Yeah,
And
it's crazy.
I had, with each surgery, my goal was to return back to dance. And with each surgery, I could not return back to dance. And at the time, I was teaching Pilates also. And so I felt like my identity was just, I didn't know what to do. I was so lost in
Hmm.
terms of my direction, even though I loved teaching. Um, and I didn't know that I wanted Pilates at that point to be my full time career. But when I started working with dancers, even though I was still dealing with my own ankle injury, I had to sort of reframe my identity as a dancer. And I had to think, okay, so if I'm just bringing the bitterness that I have for being prematurely cut short in my career to my
Yes.
practice, then I'm not doing anyone a service at all. It's actually doing
Right.
everybody a disservice, because I'm always going to be bitter if my clients are achieving more professionally in the dance world than I am.
Yes.
Um, so instead, I felt like, okay, so what's my ultimate goal? And I realized, well, my ultimate goal as a Pilates teacher who works with dancers is that I really want to empower my dancers to have more skills and better body awareness and a more healthful career. Why? Not just so they can have a more healthful career, although that's the goal, but the longer they're dancing and the happier they are, the better energy comes back to me because
Of
one, I get to go
course.
watch them perform. It's fantastic. Two,
Yes.
I feel this like real sense of pride when somebody is able to dance until they're 45 or whatever.
Hmm.
You know,
Yes.
three, it's like it's sort of self-serving. I get to go see them on stage all the time. It's great. You know, it's like
Free tickets. Check. Yeah.
and then four, I get to see them achieve their goals. And so even
Yeah.
if it's not me, then I have this real sense that they're able to get to where they want because of the skills that I'm helping them cultivate.
Yeah. I
And
love
that's
that.
exciting.
Yes.
But a lot of teachers don't feel that way.
I was gonna say. No, exactly. Like what you said is so mature and so healthy and so rare.
Yeah, yeah,
You know,
for sure.
because even in that, like you kind of echo what I was saying. Like you said it so just naturally. I'm a Pilates teacher who teaches dance. Like you could have said I'm a dancer who teaches Pilates.
Right, right.
They're both true.
Yeah, it's definitely true. And it's something that actually my husband says. My husband's a martial arts teacher, and he says that you sort of have to be willing as a teacher to get to the point where you are excited about your students surpassing your abilities.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, and that I'm sure that rings true for everyone who has a teacher training program if they're doing it well, like Blossom Joel. Like if you have an apprentice program and you're just trying to make sure that those people just stay like one step below you so that you can continue to be the master, you're doing everybody a disservice.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. So yeah. No, I mean
Yeah.
that's so true. Sorry.
Oh no, no.
Circling back to the bullying thing for a moment, there's also the component of like canceling on Facebook and all those different things. Like what? Like, sorry.
Yeah. There's a lot of cancel culture going on,
Yes.
especially right now in the community where you couldn't possibly have had this experience because I had this experience. Well, I mean, I,
like
I don't
like how
even
do
know
you
where
say
to
I think
start with that.
right. Yes. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean uh, that whole cancel culture is interesting. I was talking with my daughter about that, and how it is just a knee-jerk reaction at times, right? You just see it and just like axe a whole person for everything they've done, and I, it's just an interesting culture that we're living in, and the responses to it.
Yes, except I do to a certain extent I understand that. I as everything has been going on, when I won the Pilates Anytime competition, a lot of people friended me on Facebook, and
Mm,
so at the time I didn't know a lot of Pilates teachers around the country, and I was like, yes, 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 yes. You know, great. I have this bigger community, and then somebody who I've never met in person, but who was a Facebook friend, posted something about how she stood for her Black friends, but she doesn't support Black Lives Matter. And I was like, whoa,
mm,
uh, well, this is really loaded for me, and I don't know this person. And I had to think about, do I want to respond? Or is it better that I just
mm.
am not friends with this person? You know, what's the bigger picture here? And I thought about it and I was like, well, you know, I could respond, but truthfully, I'm not interested in getting into a tit for tat argument. And there's so
Yes.
much going on in the world right now that's more important and needs my attention that it's better that I'm
Mm,
just not friends with this person.
yes.
We don't have
Wow.
the same fundamental beliefs. Okay. Does that mean you have to have the same fundamental beliefs as everybody you are involved with? No, but
No.
it's nice when you're a little bit aligned, you know?
Yes. No, exactly. Yeah. Um, I'll get to that comment in a section. That I was mentioning
Yeah, I'd
yesterday
love
that
to.
yesterday I had someone post on my thread. I put something about Walter Wallace Jr., who was assassinated by the police, effectively, and I just had so sad. And then someone posted on it and basically went into a little bit of a tirade about me, about the, how do you say it? There's some essential parts, there's some really important parts of the headline that was missed, and kind of highlighted how the police are being vilified in this, and it was just off. It was really, really off. So I responded, and then he responded, and then I responded, and he responded. And it wasn't like it was like a tit for tat. It was like I said one thing, he brought up another component. I responded to that component, and then he said something, I responded to that, and then that's it. I'm not responding to it anymore. Some other people chimed in, and I decided to just leave it. But this is someone that I know I've worked with in the past and would consider a friend, but we were really at odds on what he did. So I sent him a message privately. And in the private message, I said, like, it's true that it might look like we were vilifying the police, and explained some things. And I got down to my point, and my point was this. His response was insensitive to my feelings,
Right.
where he had jumped right into fact finding on the article that discounted my experience of the article, or my experience of what was happening, where the point I'm making was there's yet another black man killed by the police.
Right.
And
Right.
and he was like, well, what if they could have done this? They should have done this. Why do you know? How do you know? So it was interesting how this dialogue was. It wasn't one where I could just like unfriend him. I wanted to actually have a dialogue with him, and have some of it be public enough that people could see how it was being handled. And he actually apologized, said I didn't realize that, decided to take his piece down. And I was thinking about it afterwards. Like, I'm glad that we had that dialogue, even though we were not seeing eye to eye on it. Because if for no other reason, here's an opportunity for me to respond to it in what I felt was kind of like an intelligent way, not like an angry black man. I'm just gonna cancel you out or cuss you off or throw more facts at you. It was more just like, let's have a dialogue. Let's look at the different pieces. And yeah, it turned out to be good in the fact that he took it down, he apologized, all these different things. And I recognized at that moment that he wasn't mean spirited in doing it. He was just insensitive in doing it.
Right. Right. But I think that that's important, and I think that that's sort of what we're seeing in the Pilates forums, is that a lot of times the moderators, there's these conversations going on that are really, I think, important, but the moderators or other members of the groups don't want to hear them, and so they report them or they shut down the thread, because I think that people are not, the dialogues make people uncomfortable, and so they're
Yes.
not interested in seeing them in a way.
Right.
Like I've seen so many comments, and like I can't even think which forums saying, I follow this group for Pilates business advice. Like, why are you talking about race? Well, you know,
Yeah.
it's a big
Right.
deal in the Pilates industry. It's a huge deal in the
Mm-hmm.
Pilates industry. However, I think that people really don't want to, they feel safer if that's just not a conversation that's going on
Right.
across
They
water.
do feel safer, but I mean, yeah, yes, exactly. Well, no one likes to be uncomfortable,
Right, right,
right? Um, and even we give lip service to wanting to be better and to be, it's a fitness industry, right? Like, I mean, like you can give lip service to being stronger and faster all day long, but until you get under that squat, or until you get under that bench press, or until you start doing those 100 repeats on the track, and you're hating your life,
right.
you're not going to get better.
Exactly. And I think that it's up to all of us, not just those of us who've experienced bias, but actually even especially those of us who've experienced bias, to look at our own practices and try our best to figure out how to become more inclusive humans in general.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Um,
great.
I mean, across the board, I mean, I think that all of us have to look at these implicit biases. Like, if I have, I don't know, like an older white male client walk into my practice, I am going to make assumptions about this client. I have to address that bias that I have
Yes.
as a biracial woman. You know, it's like we all have these things in our head that we
These
may or may not
preconceived
acknowledge.
ideas. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. True. It's true. I mean, like, in a lot of this is yeah, wishful thinking will not get you there. Yeah,
No.
I mean, there's all these things that we're challenging, and this is a renewed process every single day. Like, I mean, I think we're deceived to think that we've arrived
Yeah.
because we're talking about it. Like, you know what I mean? Like we're forever having to deal with new contexts and new situations. We have to revisit it in a different way.
Yeah. But I don't think that that means we can't celebrate moments where, I mean, first of all, no, this is an ongoing, lifelong pursuit, right, of becoming somebody who is a truly inclusive person. But
Yeah.
I think that also it doesn't mean that we can't celebrate the steps we're taking.
No,
Like,
right.
there can be moments where we said, wow, I'm really glad that I allowed that person to show me themselves. Or I'm really glad that I didn't say this. Or you catch yourself
Hmm.
saying something that could have been perceived the wrong way.
Yes.
Or you decide to educate yourself and step back. I mean, I think that when
Yeah.
we achieve all of those, we should still be, I would not say necessarily self congratulatory, but we can say, wow, that was a step in the right direction.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Self-congratulatory isn't necessarily a bad thing sometimes.
That's true. That's true. But I
Yeah.
mean, it's not like, oh,
Yeah.
I did this, I did that,
I mean, don't walk around all day doing it. I mean, it's just like take your
Yeah.
moments and
Like
yeah.
my moment was a I had a moment in my way back in, I don't know, probably February, in my studio, and I was teaching a math class, and I looked around the room, and I had ages from 11
Hmm.
to 74,
Yes.
and I had body types from about 75 pounds. That was my little tiny 11-year-old,
Yes.
to about 230.
Yeah.
And I had races from a blonde, blue eyed woman who's actually
Hmm.
African American through somebody who has just like the darkest ebony skin, all just running the gambit. And I was
Yes.
like, okay, I'm having a moment. I've
Yes.
arrived because I've created this kind of environment that I would want to
Yes.
be in, that I want to be in
Yes.
now. But it's
Right.
like, I looked at my class and I was like, and everybody here is moving beautifully. Like, that's what I want to cultivate.
Nice.
So yeah, I mean, so of course we could have these pats on the back, but it doesn't mean that
Yes.
like, okay, I've arrived, great, I'm done. No,
Mhm.
it's just the beginning.
Right. But if you could bottle that, you would.
Oh, totally.
Yes.
Totally.
Yes. And I've been debating whether to say this comment or not, but I'm gonna throw it out there, and if I get backlash for it, whatever. When we talk about those implicit biases and the things that we carry, I feel that when I'm doing these core conversations as well, and I'll give you an example of that if you look through a bunch of like old conversations, whenever I have somebody on here and they know that I'm not gay, I am, as a black man teaching Pilates, but not gay, not a dancer. I feel like the projection that comes onto me is that I'm gonna be this kind of macho, not really welcoming or accepting of people who have different lifestyles.
Yeah, yeah.
No one ever says that, but I hear it in the way that they talk, and it's a funny moment for me when they recognize that I'm not gonna judge them, and their guard comes down, and they start to talk more comfortably.
I think that that goes back to sort of like, at least from my perspective, that goes back to sort of the jock mentality, where in my school and most people's high schools, people who were athletes, like the straight male athlete group, at least in my school, was also the popular group. And
Yes.
I think that a lot of us who come into the Pilates community maybe didn't necessarily fall into the popular group.
Right.
And so I think that there's already that judgment there based on like, well, like he's not quite
This
going to
jock
understand
wants
where
to
I'm
talk to
coming
me.
from. Because,
Yeah.
right, like I was
Yeah.
in the theater club and I wore all black, or I mean, that wasn't me, but um,
Yeah.
although I did wear all black, but that's a whole other thing. But
Yes.
But no, I mean, I think that there's that mentality too, and especially with the dance community, because so many of us grew up being bullied by the athletes. Um,
Oh.
I think that people are a little bit like,
That's tough. So okay, that's really really insightful. I feel like I want to give you a hug now too, but like that's really insightful that there's that perception that like that bullying stereotype is here. Are they going to embrace me or are they going to bully me again?
right. I think that that's huge. I think that's huge.
That is that's a game changer for me, Marimba.
Well, and I think also it's not just that a lot of Pilates teachers are from like the dorky club or the nerdy club or the, we're not necessarily from the Dungeons and Dragons group, if that's your thing. No offense taken. But I think that a lot of people who also teach in this community are slightly um, either we come from dance and we're used to that bullying, or we might have physical issues that have created instances where we've been bullied,
Yes.
or we might have health issues. And so there's sometimes this kind of sense, and it goes back to our own body awareness and
Vulnerabilities.
self-confidence and vulnerability. Yeah. That, you know, we're where we already feel a little bit marginalized, and so then
Hmm.
it's kind of like wow, and then somebody who identifies as a straight male athlete wants to talk to us. Well, this is different. So
Yes.
I think I think that's probably why you get that sense,
Yep.
is my
Yeah.
guess.
Yeah, most likely. And yeah, that really is insightful for me because I like my I feel like I'm just being a black male. I am forever trying to disprove stereotypes every time I walk into a room,
Right.
right? So every time I walk into a room, I have to prove that I am smart. I have to prove that I am capable. I have to prove that I'm not going to rob you right now. I need to prove that like whatever it is, right? Like you walk into these situations. And how many times have you heard me say, I have my master's degree, I'm educated? Like, I mean, like little things like that. It's like, oh, okay, this guy actually went to school. Oh, okay, this guy, like, you know what I mean? You feel like you're always disproving someone else's stereotype. So because I walk in the room with that, when I have these conversations with people and I see that their guard is up and then their guard comes down, I kind of smiled, think, okay, good. Now we can start the conversation because you've stopped judging me or you stopped bracing for impact based on your own past vulnerabilities, and we can have a conversation. And
Right.
the way that this comes out for me a lot of times is I'll hear someone who is not straight say early in the conversation, well, my partner and I were doing this, and this, or my partner and I run this business. And then 27 minutes into the conversation is my husband and I did this.
Right.
I'm like, oh, okay, so now we can share that it's your husband. I'm like, let's go. Let's have this conversation because I was cool with it before you shifted from partner to husband.
But I think that's also indicative of not necessarily people just letting their guard down, but people cultivating their own public persona too, because not
Yes.
everybody feels comfortable being as public about their private life
Yep.
as others.
Absolutely
And
sensitive to that too.
that's a real thing. And I think that sometimes, and especially as teachers, it's like we're so used to putting up boundaries, and we have to put up boundaries a
Hmm.
lot of times
Yes.
around our own privacy, just in order to have a professional environment, I would say.
Hmm.
Um,
For sure.
that it is common that somebody would sort of hide aspects of their professional life or their personal life
Hmm.
in anything that's going to be talking about their professional life. I think that's
Oh, for sure. For sure.
pretty normal.
Yeah, yeah.
uh,
No,
yeah.
I agree with that, and I think that's why it makes me smile in the sense that there's this delight in saying, okay, you trust me enough to share that,
Right. Exactly.
right? You trust enough that this is a safe space to let that be out there in the whole world. Um, yeah, when like in Joel's saying, that is wise. That it definitely is wise in some way. So, and that's why I count it a blessing when those moments happen
Yeah, for
as
sure.
well, right?
Yeah, I mean, on
Mm,
the same time,
yeah, it's
it's
good.
always weird too when you get somebody who's just like overshare. You know,
Yes, like whoa.
we're like, I did not need to
Yeah,
know that, but thank you.
yeah, yeah. Oh, I love that stuff. I mean, I can roll with that too, right? I'm like, okay, like thanks for sharing. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So
Yeah.
good. We have 6 minutes left, remember? Like as always, these conversations totally fly by.
You'd go like, boom.
Yes, totally. So like in terms of like what's kind of like your closing thoughts and what is your kind of message for your people and for those who are watching at this point?
Well, I think that back to what we were talking about, I think that it's really important for us as teachers to take a lens on where we are in our own journey of self acceptance and our own journey of understanding our personal mind body connection. And first of all, cultivate our own practices, and then also figure out how we're going to teach the people that we are teaching how to do the same thing. And ideally, that involves a constant ongoing dialogue about where we are in terms of our own bias. And ideally, that will also help our clients have or begin to have a dialogue about where they are in their own bias. And if that's the case, then we've really taught, then we've really become teachers. Because teaching is not just about how you can facilitate a better roll up, right?
Right.
Um, so what I hope people will take away is this is a constant pursuit. Becoming more empowered and less biased and more of, I would say, a global citizen is a constant pursuit. Just because we talked about the Black Lives Matter movement and we had it over, just because there is a rampant issue of bullying that's more
Right.
or less died down in the last week, doesn't mean that bullying isn't still a problem. Just because we have our own bias about the people walking into our
Right.
studio or we're seeing online, you know, thick, thin, tall, short, whatever, doesn't mean that we've arrived and we're perfect and we have no
But
judgment.
in our final 3 minutes, Mary, I just want to say thank you so much because you are really, truly a leader, uh, beautiful inside and out in terms of what you're bringing to the space. And just keep doing what you're doing. I'm cheering for you always.
Well, thank you, and same to you. I love what you're doing, and thank you for having me. But also thank you for so many people in this community who have something important to say. Everybody appreciates it.